Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope that folks had a lovely fall break. On Tuesday mornings, I always read to our kindergarten through second grade students, and the energy level was uniquely high today. I think I might have fed into that. We always end our session with students reciting the school's virtues. So we do all 7 of them, and then the kids define them after we name each one. And normally, just to kind of control the excitement in the room, I make them scream, whisper the virtues. Today, we just screamed. So everything that they've stored up over the last 4 days, they let loose in one kind of barbaric yap over a few seconds. So it was a loud morning, but great to be back at ACA and thrilled to be starting this second quarter with all of you. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll jump right into today's content. So I think many of you probably saw this in the Chronicle that went out. We've publicized this in a few places, but it kind of bears repeating. We were really proud to be named a literacy leader by the Georgia Department of Education. So this happened last week on October 4th. Dr. Hahn, Mrs. Adams, and Mrs. Hawley went to a local elementary school, and they were honored by the superintendent of public schools in all of Georgia, and then the current superintendent of Atlanta Public Schools, Dr. Battle, was also there. I think that the students of the third grade class, so the award actually is designated for those schools that have third graders that I've either showed kind of tremendous growth. I think it was perhaps 10 to 15% year over year, or at least 90% of the class was reading at grade level or above. And we fell into that latter camp of 90% of our third graders last year reading at grade level. This is the group of students that were kindergartners during COVID, right? It was their very first year in school that was disrupted. And so I think there's just a note of gratitude from us that's deserved for the families, the parents, the grandparents, so many of you that supported these children through some really difficult years. The majority of our they're current fourth graders, but our third graders' educations had been disrupted, and yet to have them achieving at this level is really impressive. So I hope that you all hear us celebrating this award as a celebration, certainly of the excellent work that Dr. Hahn and folks like Mrs. Adams and Ms. Hawley are also doing, but also very clearly a celebration of our families and of our students for their level of dedication and persistence through some really trying and challenging years of learning. So this is, hanging in our front lobby at Atlantic Law School. So if you're just dying to see it in person, come and pay us a visit. But we were proud to receive this award last week. Another thing that happened last week was another RMO ceremony. So once a month, we do an all-faculty meeting. In the intervening weeks, our lower and upper schools gather with their respective principals. But last week, again, on this monthly rhythm, we bring everyone together for an afternoon conversation where we review our quarterly and yearly goals and discuss the progress that we've made and what our aims are for the next 90 days. At this particular meeting, we honored one of our longest tenured and most special teachers at ACA, Mrs. Perry Phillips. Perry has been instrumental in building out our literacy program across the lower school. There are so many students that are struggling readers that, because of Perry's diligent and attentive and professional work, have really seen their outcomes transform. She is so much of the life of what happens in our lower school at ACA. Whenever there's a difficult moment on the K1 hallway, Perry is the first to step in to support a teacher. And it's just been one of the most important presences on our campus over the last decade. Something that I said when we were giving her this award is that Perry is the person who gives me courage in my work. She's a person that I see walking the halls, sitting in her office, working one-on-one with students, and it makes me believe more firmly in the work that we're doing at Atlanta Classical, in its goodness, and in our professionalism as a group. So if you see Mrs. Phillips, please be sure to acknowledge her, congratulate her. She received one of these RMO coins. For those of you that are new to ACA, this is a round metal object. It's a military tradition. These are challenge coins that go to men and women that are embodying the virtues of an institution. So Mrs. Perry Phillips received one of these last week, and we're tremendously grateful to have her on our team. I wanted to quickly highlight two of our external priorities for this coming school year. I've been kind of reviewing these over the course of this academic year. We're now, of course, in the second quarter. But the first two that we've named center around how we communicate as a school. And then the second item is about the state of our charter renewal, our charter agreement with Atlanta Public Schools that is up for renewal every 5 years. So one of the items that we discussed at our all faculty meeting last week was communication. This is something that we talk about constantly, and particularly at the end of a quarter, this is relevant as grades are posted, as especially across the upper school, work gets more challenging with students turning in term papers, with students taking, midterm exams in some cases. There's always this possibility for tension. And so as a faculty, we gathered and sort of reviewed some of our best practices for communication. And I wanted to talk through a couple of these items with all of you. The way that we framed this conversation was actually with discussing a book that our seniors read in the fall of every year. It's a work by Fyodor Dostoevsky, a famous Russian novelist. And the book is called Notes from Underground. There's this one really poignant moment where the woman who is sort of the heroine of the novel is being antagonized by this underground character who is the narrator of the story. He is berating her and belittling her. But she, through an act of interpretation, by choosing to see the goodness in what he was saying, by sort of interpreting every word from him in the best faith, is able to transform what he means to be a kind of criticism into an expression of love. It's this beautiful, powerful moment. And we talked about it just kind of relative to our communication at ACA. Communicating about our work can be really challenging because there's so much at stake. We care deeply about our students, and you, of course, care deeply about your children. And we are united together by our mission in this work of forming knowledgeable and virtuous citizens of our country. And there are moments where we stumble, moments where we make mistakes, and then have to talk to each other about what went wrong and how we can rectify the situation. And what I always want to insist on to our faculty is the importance of bringing good faith to every conversation, believing that a parent is reaching out, or that you are reaching out to a parent because we love that child, because we believe in the goodness of that child and the importance of this education and forming their hearts and minds. Last school year, at the very beginning of the year, I sent out this sort of long note that describes our approach to communication at ACA. I'm actually going to send that out again next week, just sort of in light of kind of moving into second quarter. I think there are a couple good reminders for faculty, for staff, and for families. But I wanted to run through one element of this email that gives just a couple quick bullet points about how communication happens at ACA and some of the best practices that we talk about internally and then that we talk about with parents. So to teachers, some of the things that we insist on is that, one, parents don't like surprises. They don't like it when teachers sit on challenging or difficult news for a couple of weeks before delivering it, before a parent is able to respond. And so we are always encouraging our faculty to be proactive in their communication, particularly when there's something challenging. But along with that, it can be, I think, a kind of common experience among parents at schools to feel like the only time they hear from the school is when something has gone wrong. I find sometimes that when I call parents, there's always a kind of edge in their voice as they anticipate hearing, oh, this is what your child has done this day. And I like to be able to surprise them at times and say, no, I'm calling just to celebrate or praise the excellent work that your child has done over the last couple of weeks. But we say to teachers, please go out of your way to name, to acknowledge the good things that students are doing in class. And this is probably especially important for our upper school families and students. Your ninth grade boy is unlikely to be very verbose on the way home describing what happened in school that day. And it might be that the only thing that you're ever hearing about what's happening at school is when things are challenging or when they've got a lot of work to do. And so it's really important then that teachers are talking to all of you about what's happening in the classroom, what's invisible to your eye that they see every single day. I find sometimes that in parent-teacher conferences that are coming up in I think just next week, teachers sometimes describe a version of a student that parents barely recognize because the child becomes something else, something better in the classroom. And so we really want our teachers to share all of that with you. We ask for all teachers to reply within 24 hours to emails that they receive from you all, even if that's just to acknowledge receipt of that email. We also, and this gets to my opening comment, we ask that they show empathy, that they genuinely listen, because you all know your children the best. You all are the experts in your children, and we need to be generous and understanding and hopeful in our communication, so that we can work toward, again, achieving our mission for every student. And then finally, if we make mistakes, if the school makes a mistake, if I make a mistake, if teachers do, that we ought to own it. And this is something that we are all growing in constantly. I think one of the dangers of talking about communication is the possibility of hypocrisy. And I'm certain that there are ways in which, our communication as a school has been imperfect. And so we never want for these sorts of communications to be finger wagging. Our aspiration is that they are aspirational, that this is sort of the standards of good communication that we want to define us. To parents, one of the things that we'll talk about in this email is that we do ask that teachers, respond within 24 hours, but we also acknowledge that in some professional contexts, this is a really long time, that, depending on your industry, it might be an expectation that as soon as you receive a note from an important client, you get back to them right away. We think that teachers who are glued to their emails are probably necessarily not doing great work in the classroom. We want them to be attending to your students, to the work that's happening every day, and for email to be a secondary or tertiary concern. And so please don't take it as a sign of neglect or something if teachers do take a full 24 hours to get back to you. Another note, and this is potentially a challenging recommendation, but we ask that before you send an email to consider really carefully if this is the best mode of communication. So often, I think little conflicts can emerge at a school because of the difficulty, really the impossibility of reading tone and intent in an email. You can do things with your voice. You can sort of modulate the sound of your voice, the intonation, in order to communicate intention and meaning, but none of that is possible through an email. And so one of the things that we encourage is that, especially with difficult conversations, that phone calls or in-person conversations are always the best mode. Another note about communication is that when parents are reaching out to teachers, we ask for them to think carefully about whether copying an administrator on that email is the right approach. This is not because we don't want administrators to be part of these conversations. We absolutely do. But our hope is always that it can be resolved directly between a parent and a teacher, before you have to kind of, escalate up the chain of command, so to speak. In part because I think that teachers sometimes feel like there's a lack of trust when a principal is immediately looped into a conversation. There can be an implication that, you won't resolve this sufficiently on your own. So we immediately need to go to someone who is sort of ranking above you in order to resolve it appropriately. So this is just a simple encouragement to please sort of honor teachers and their work and to address things directly with them. A couple other just final comments or one more. We ask that parents do communicate through school channels, right? Through Parent Square or through ACA email. One of the sort of beautiful elements of being in a small community, but simultaneously challenging, is that, many of you have friends that are longtime friends who work on the faculty at Atlantic Classical. And so you have a lot of their cell phone numbers. And we're not asking that you block teachers' numbers, nor are we asking for teachers to block your numbers. But where there is communication about the school, about the work that children are doing, we always want for that communication to happen on school channels. So I'll finish this comment again by saying, this email that I'm going to be sending out, it's sort of done in light of parent-teacher conferences. It's an email that the school sends out every fall. And I should state very clearly that in general, our parents are excellent communicators, and you all are generous and empathetic, and always sort of clear in your love for the school and your love for what's happening in the classrooms. So this email is not coming from a place of distrust or difficulty, but instead we just think there's a good reminder here for all of us about the best standards of communication at our school. One other external priority for this school year was getting rechartered. And I wanted to give you all just a quick update here. I had mentioned about a month and a half ago, that we had submitted our recharter application with Atlanta Public Schools at the end of August. Not last week, but the week prior, we had a team from APS who's responsible for reviewing that application actually come out to the school and spend an hour and a half with us on campus, visiting classrooms, talking to administrators, sort of getting their questions answered about how the school works. One of the reviewers on his way out actually just described the school as breathtaking, which was really encouraging. I was really pleased to be able to turn around and share that with faculty members. These sort of external affirmations of their work are really critical. Last Tuesday, October 4th, the Atlanta Public Schools review team and our board, along with me and some members of the Liberty team, were on a call with again, this APS review team, answering questions about our application, and that conversation went really well. Again, the only deviation from our previous charter agreement is requesting a 5% buffer with our enrollment. So right now, our charter caps our enrollment at 698 students, and we're asking for that number to go up to 733. And the justification for this is that our middle school expansion, which again grew our 6th through 8th grade classes from about 54 students to 66, is bringing a lot of new students through the high school, and we want to be able to work with all of them, right, all the way through, and so that would likely take our enrollment past 698. So that's the one request that we made. Again, the conversation went well. We've had nothing but positive indications from APS, so we're feeling really confident about this process. All right, a couple other just quick announcements of some interesting, exciting upcoming conversations. So Liberty Classical Schools, which is our charter management organization, is going to be sponsoring a conversation that will happen in person at Georgia Tech. Actually, it'll be at the Research Institute in one of their conference auditoriums on October 24th at 7 p.m. So the conversation will be between Dr. Anika Prather, who is someone that has spent a lot of time with ACA over the last 3 years, done a number of trainings for us. As a faculty, we spent a lot of time talking about a book that she published last year about the role of the Black community in developing the version of classical education that we do now in 21st century America, and right here at Atlanta Classical. She has been deeply invested in sort of exploring the roots of that work. It'll be a conversation between her, Dr. Bernice A. King, who is the CEO of the King Center, a daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and then Dr. Kalisha Graves, who is the programs officer at the King Center, and myself. The four of us will be having a conversation at 7 p.m. on October 24th about Dr. King's vision of education and how that aligns with classical education, and in general is sort of in support of promoting civil discourse in our democracy. So this, I think, will be a really enjoyable conversation. It'll be interesting. If you want to register for this, you can go to libertyclassicalschools.org, and there's an opportunity to register there. So I'm excited about being part of this discussion in a couple of weeks. Another conversation that's actually coming up on the same day during my community call, though, is with Dr. Dan Copeland, who is the Dean of the School of Education at Hillsdale. He runs the graduate school there. He published a book about a year ago called Tried and True, which is just a primer on what good teaching looks like. So he and I, during the community call, will be having just a conversation about what the essential components of good instruction are, what the responsibilities of a teacher are, what the risks of teaching are. I think that this conversation will be enlightening, and Dr. Copeland is just one of the kindest, gentlest, most thoughtful people that I know, and so we're thrilled to have a conversation with him during this community call time on the 24th of October. A quick view of next week's community call. I'm going to have our Deans of Student Life, that is Ms. Christy Yonker, Mr. Garrett Holt, Mrs. Claire Marie Huff, on our calls next week describing their work. So this is one of the most important changes to the leadership structure that we had going into this year, was to add these deans of student life to our teams, to be kind of responsible and attentive to the experience of our students and school culture. And so they're going to be just describing some of the broad aims of their work and some of their goals for the school year. I think you all will really enjoy hearing from them. So that'll be just a week from today. They'll take the majority of the call to talk about their work. All right, I want to quickly review the legenda here. Just a lot of upcoming events that I think are important, and that you all might like to know more about. So I'm going to quickly share my screen again. All right. So first, you all know this, but the Cavalier Fund is currently underway. This year, we're really trying to limit the Cavalier Fund to a particular, an established timeline, instead of having the thing kind of stretch out over the course of the school year. We're taking the NPR approach and just flooding the waves for one crucial week. And then moving back to our regular scheduled programming. So you all will be hearing from us about the Cavalier Fund this week, and we hope that you'll give. I will note here, we started talking about this with faculty last week as well, and we are already at 98% giving from our teachers and our faculty and staff, which we're just really grateful for. It's amazing to have a team of teachers and staff members who want to contribute themselves to the work that we're doing here at ACA. So we're grateful for the commitment of so many members of our teams. Couple quick reminders here. October 19th, we've got an early release and then parent-teacher conferences in the afternoon into the early evening. We've got our multicultural festival scheduled for October 21st. This has become one of the best events that we have every year at ACA. We have a ton of families representing different countries from across the world who set up little tables and have food and just sort of information about the culture of the country from which they originated. This is really a beautiful event and a ton of fun. So October 21st, I hope y'all will mark your calendars. Couple other upcoming events. We have something for dads, our second annual Brew and Q on November 16th. This will happen at the Garden Hills Rec Center from 6 p.m. to 9. Anyway, promises to be a lovely event. Supposedly the conversation is going to be about how the Roman Empire shaped American democracy. I'm not certain that will actually be true. College football rivalries are a more likely subject of conversation. At the end of this month, our high school theater program is going to be putting on a performance of a Greek comedy by Aristophanes called Thesmorphia. That should be both humorous and devastating, is what I'm hearing. It's just $5. I really hope that you all will make a priority to attend this to just acknowledge the hard work that these kids do and hopefully have a lovely evening as well. One other thing that I want to mention here. Starting on October 25th, we're going to be having a series of preview events about our high school at ACA. So for our 8th grade parents, we're going to have a high school tour that will be led by members of the administration. These will happen in really small groups. It'll be an opportunity for you all to just see what the high school looks like in real time and ask questions. On November 8th, we're going to have an event for 5th through 7th grade parents in the cafeteria, where we have the same thing of just previewing the curriculum and the life of the high school at ACA. I think there are lots of great questions about how it happens. And so we want to be as transparent and proactive in communicating with all of you as possible about what the high school is like. And then we've also got an 8th grade parent coffee about preparing for the 9th grade that's scheduled in January. And these events take you all the way through February. So again, we hope that you'll make a priority of attending these. If you've got students in this sort of band of 5th through 8th grade and you're interested in learning more about our high school at ACA. All right. One final thing for all of you today. As I've been working on these calls and thinking about what all I want to communicate with you about the work of our school at ACA, it's critical that you all are giving me feedback about how these calls are going, or if there are additional topics that you all want for me to address. So in the chat here, I've posted a link to a survey that I would love it if you all would take literally 3 minutes to complete, where I ask what kind of topics you might like me to cover over the upcoming months, and also just give a space for you to give sort of standard feedback. If the questions don't prompt you to or don't have topics that you're interested in, please give whatever feedback you've got. I'm really interested in hearing from all of you about how I can make this time as valuable as possible. So please go ahead and complete this survey if you've got a minute. Again, I just posted it in the chat. I'll put it in the Legenda as well, so that we can get as many responses as possible. All right, I hope you all have a lovely week. It's great to be starting second quarter. Things are going well here at Atlanta Classical, and I hope things are great in your homes as well. Have a lovely morning.